Hello and welcome to the Victory Podcast. My name is Chris Haddad alongside my co-host Steve McGrath. In today's episode, we have former NFL quarterback and current football analyst Dan Orlovsky. If you are unfamiliar with Dan, let's get you familiar. Born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, played college football at the University of Connecticut. When he left UConn, I'm just going to rattle off some records he has here. Pass completions, pass attempts, yards passing, touchdown passes, total plays, total yards. Guy did it all. After he left UConn, he joined the NFL where he was drafted by the Detroit Lions in 2005, round 5, pick 145. Teams Dan played for: Detroit, Houston, Indy, Tampa Bay, where he landed back at Detroit. Dan, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, man. Solid introduction, man.
As I say, I went pretty fast on that. Hopefully everyone got everything. Dan, I want to dive headfirst right into this thing. Went to UConn. You were highly touted as a recruit coming out of high school. Big Ten, ACC schools. Why did you pick UConn and the success you had at UConn? I want to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, but first I want to talk about why you actually went to UConn and what drew you to the school coming out of high school as a highly touted recruit.
Well, I started getting recruited by UConn pretty early on in my high school days, like sophomore year-ish. And when they started recruiting me, I didn't really pay them much attention because I was getting recruited by bigger schools. UConn was still a smaller school, so I really didn't give him the time of day type thing. And then, to his credit, Coach Randy Edsel, who was my head coach then, and he's actually back at UConn now, just stayed on me and stayed on me and stayed on me. And even though I was kind of spending most of my time thinking about the other schools like Purdue and Michigan State and UVA and all those bigger conference schools, he stayed with me, kept selling me on the dream or like the possibility of doing what everyone thought was crazy, taking UConn from like 1AA to 1A and in-state and all that stuff. So it really came down to me falling in love with what he was, I guess, and I tell people, selling me in a way. I was probably one of the best decisions in my life for sure.
Now, did he get the hometown discount because you are from Bridgeport, Connecticut? Did that play any factor in mind? I know when you have Michigan State, Purdue, and those types of schools on the line, did anything of in-state? Like, I'm sure you said UConn was kind of in the back of your mind, and then as the more he sold you, it was like, well, okay, my family can come see me play close by. Did that play a factor at all, or is that something that wasn't really too much?
It didn't play a factor in the traditional thoughts that people have, like, oh, you'll be close to your family or your friend. It played a factor in the thought process that I was from Connecticut and I wanted to be the guy to put the place on the map. Like, that's where it played. I wasn't from New York and, okay, go do it at UConn. Like, I wanted to be the kid from Connecticut that then in turn put the state school on the map. Because when you're from Connecticut, all we have is UConn. We have UConn and like ESPN. So UConn is our baby in a way. So that played certainly a factor in my mind. And I remember as a teenager, people telling me, this is such an important decision for you because 20 years from now, you'll be able to go back to the state and, so many doors will be opened up for you. And I didn't even recognize what they were trying to tell me. Like, I was like, I'm going for football. And so the cool thing is being able to go back to the state now, and people always reference the UConn days and whatnot. So, I just wanted to be the kid from the state that put the school on the map.
Yeah. Now, they went from division. Now they moved up to division, right? When you were there, as far as now, did that play a factor in as well when you were playing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. They went from 1AA, which is like the
CS, right?
CS right now, and up to 1A back in the day, which is FBS right now. They moved up there 2 years before my freshman year. So my freshman year was 2001. They moved up in 99. Absolutely a part of my decision. I would not have gone there if they were a 1AA school or had stayed in a 1AA school or we were joining the Big East. Even if we weren't going to join the Big East, I would not have gone to UConn because I wanted to play big-time college football. So for sure played a part in my decision because that was a big thing. Coach Edsel coming into my locker room and saying, hey, we're going to go join 1A football, and by your sophomore year, you're going to be playing a 1A football schedule, and by your junior year, you'll be part of the Big East. And back then, the Big East was Miami, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, West Virginia. I mean, dogs. So, that for sure, that was probably the key turning point for me.
No, it's good. And that's – so you finished your career at UConn, and senior year is coming around. When did you know that the NFL was a possibility? Was it? I mean, I rattled off at the beginning of the show all these passing records that you have. So something had to tick where, okay, I might be a mid-round guy or early round. Or when did you know that the NFL was in your future?
I think I really started to truly believe that my sophomore year of college. I had a pretty good sophomore year and thought, okay, I fit a lot of the boxes that need to be checked off. And so that's when I started to think of less of a dream and more of a reality. And then my junior year, I had a pretty successful junior year and landed on Mel Kiper's big board and whatnot. And so when all that started to happen, he was projecting me as like the 20th pick or whatever, or top 20 on his big board type thing. That's when it was like, I started thinking of myself as a potential first round pick, to be honest with you. That's all of us do.
Yeah, you have to. You have to.
Right?
So,
my junior year is when it first, really started to go, okay, like that's when I thought I'm going to play in the NFL. I'm going to play in the NFL. It's just when and where type thought.
Mm-hmm. So as mentioned, round 5, pick 145. Everyone has an incredible draft day story. I'm interested to hear about your draft day story because, being a hometown kid from UConn, go to UConn from Connecticut. Yeah. I assume there was probably some big venue rented out, or were you at home? What was the draft day story?
Yeah. I mean, my draft day I tell people it was the best and one of the worst days of my life. So, I go into my, after my junior year, it's really good. I'm on Mel Kiper's big board. Go into my senior year, I'm on his top 20 big board thing. I have a pretty good senior year, so I stay relatively on the number level where he's got me ranked. And then from the end of my senior year, I go to the Senior Bowl, and I have a terrible performance. I stink, just flat out. I perform poorly. Mel Kiper crushes me on national television saying I can't play in the NFL. Yeah, like really Sports Center special. Can't play in the NFL, don't block this and that. Go to the combine. I don't really have a good combine either. And so I continue to do this fall. So I go from thinking I'm going to be a first-round pick and slowly start going, okay, maybe it's going to be the second round. Maybe it's going to be the third round. We get to right around the draft day, and I'm talking with my agents. My agents they're giving me like, yeah, you could go second round to sixth round. And I'm like, what? Like,
it's a long time waiting, right?
I can get drafted, basically. Yeah. But as a kid, I was thinking, well, I'll probably be closer to the second than I will the sixth. Just I've worked too hard to think. So first day of the draft or beginning of the draft comes, and back then it was rounds 1 and 2, 3 together, and then the second day was 4, 5, 6, 7. So Saturday morning of round 1 starts. Alex Smith is the first pick. And as the draft goes, Aaron Rodgers is taken, Jason Campbell is taken. We get to the back end of the third round. I haven't been drafted yet. And this is I was just on campus in my apartment with my friends, like 10 of us. Nothing extravagant, whatever. Like I said, I drive an F-150 with cloth seats. So yeah. I'm not this big event person type thing. Getting there back into the third round, I'm not getting drafted. I'm freaking out. I've actually got a buddy of mine who's a roommate from Norwood, Massachusetts, who gets drafted ahead of me, which was not the expectation. So I was happy for him, but I was like, dude, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And then last pick of the third round, I'm still not drafted. And then a guy named Maurice Claret gets drafted from the Ohio State.
The Ohio State,
to the Broncos. And I remember taking my phone and smashing it against the wall because I was a little bit emotional. Claret had just come off the offseason of not playing football and a lot of checkered background and whatnot. And so rough first day. And then the second day starts and I go down to Verizon. I get a new phone, call my agent, like, what's the deal? They're like, once Kyle Orton goes, you'll be the next pick. Back to Kyle Orton. And so Orton goes like within the first 5 picks of the 4th round. I'm like, sweet, finally going to go. 2 hours later, I finally get a call from the Lions, which was an absolute, euphoric moment, but a long 36 hours or so of my expectations being here and kind of falling somewhere down here. So,
yeah, and that kind of adds a little bit of fire to the pot, right? I mean,
oh yeah, it was an incredible phone call to get, in dream come true, 1,000%. It was everything that you think could be when you get an actual phone call to get drafted and fulfill your dream. but I was hot. I was absolutely ticked off that it went that way, and I fell that far. And I didn't. No player. Every player thinks they get drafted too low. But yeah, no, it certainly afforded a chip on my shoulder.
Sure.
Yeah, well, considering 12 years later, you had the career that you did. I think that probably ended up benefiting you more than anything. But all right, so you get drafted by the Lions. Walk us through, if you could, you get your first NFL playbook. What mentally are you being tasked with in terms of learning based on how everything was called and run at UConn to now getting geared up for the NFL size playbook?
Yeah, I think I tell people this. I was super fortunate to really start learning football from a X's and O's solid foundation and thinking through football from my high school days. I had a really good coach. We ran actual plays rather than – so our plays had a rhyme and a reason. There was words that had to be attached to stuff. There was levels to our concepts rather than, I had to make reads. I had to understand – the defensive line, the fronts, what they looked like and why. I had to understand why they tied to coverages and whatnot as a high school kid. It only grew as a college kid. As a college kid, when I was at UConn, we were more often than not the less talented team. And so our coaches did an incredible job of finding the tells of a defense that we would know pressure was coming. So let's call this play or let's change our protection off this. And so it was a big part of our success. And so I was fortunate to be in those situations and being forced to learn defensive tendencies or where a shade on the center from a defensive tackle meant probably pressure coming from this side or corners playing this. So I was fortunate. So when I got to the NFL and started to have to learn things, I feel like I had a great advantage because of it. That being said, the learning curve was, man, it was like being born and expected to being able to jump on a trampoline. It was like, I just remember getting the book and expecting a big book and a lot of terminology, but getting the book and going, wait, I have to erase everything that I know terminology wise and then relearn it at an exponential rate. And I think that was the hardest thing but also the greatest thing, because that's what playing quarterback in the NFL is week to week. You have to erase your mind of all the previous week's game plan and relearn a new game plan. But yeah, just everything from play call to how you're going to handle your huddles play call to your snap count play call to your formation play call to what route concepts are called, and then how you're going to call defenses and defensive fronts. Everyone does it differently. So there's so many different words attached to different situations. Yeah.
And that's extremely interesting too. You bring up what you learned in high school, because, a lot of what we preach here at Victory is we don't want a kid ever to be, I guess, buried by the fact that he doesn't have a coach that has a high extent of knowledge too. So that's why we created the mobile app and we give out all this free content so you can learn, right? And so just hearing that helped you tremendously is awesome, because that gave you essentially the foundation to learn more football and to learn football easily as well.
Yeah.
So you get to the NFL. Tell me about the hardest thing to adapt to in the NFL. Maybe mentally, was it the playbook, or was it you played at UConn and then all of a sudden you're playing in Detroit? Was it the cold weather? Was it the atmosphere of being in Detroit? Larger crowds? What was the biggest thing mentally to adapt to when you got to the NFL?
Yeah, I think the one thing that stood out for me and still does is you go from being I was 21 my senior, so I was 20 at the start of my senior and 21 during the season. You go from that season, and I was still very much so I was there to play football kid. So I'd wake up, I'd go to breakfast, I'd sleep on a futon, I'd wake up, I'd go to breakfast, I'd figure out what classes I had the day and get them done, and then I'd go do football for the great majority of the day, and then I'd go home and play video games. And that's not the case in the NFL. You go from 0 to 100 when it comes to being an adult real fast. And you get given this money and and you're forced to move to this foreign city and going, okay, figure it out, you know? And I was fortunate that I had a decent head on my shoulders, but it's still an incredible challenge to be that young and in that situation and just expected to go and be the 30-year-old veteran and that so many guys in the NFL are. So that's the biggest challenge. That was one of the biggest challenges for me to adapt to. And then it's your job. You know, you're not on scholarship anymore, you know? And so if you were dedicating, you know, if you were awake for 12 or 14 hours a day as a college kid and you dedicated 50% of that time to football, it's 100% of the time in the NFL. It's your job. And that's a really difficult thing, at least it was for me. I think a lot of young kids to get their heads wrapped around is like, it is your job. It's not a childhood dream anymore. You're getting paid. I tell people you're a stock. And if you can make the owner money, he'll keep you. And if you can't, he will get rid of you. And once you, in your mind, can wrap your head around that, the better suited you're going to be.
Right. So, you know, you talked a little bit about adapting to Detroit. You know, you had the opportunity to play with quite a few different franchises, which means quite a few different head coaches, quite a few different schemes and playbooks. What was it like, you know, going from erasing all the UConn terminology, but to go from, you know, the terminology that you were using in Detroit to then get ready to what's going on in Houston? I mean, how many times did you have to hit the reset button, and did it ever get more and more challenging, you know, the more you got into the league?
Yeah, I mean, hitting the reset button was something that became an art form, you know, a learned art form.
I'd imagine, yeah.
It was an incredibly difficult thing to go through, but also beneficial because you go from UConn and I know football in this world. Okay, I'm going to call my formations double right, you know, and I know what double right is. And then I know what pass 112 is at UConn. See, my brain can go back sometimes. And then I know what the concept hang is. Okay, cool, let's go. And then I get to the NFL and double right is something different. It's a different formation. Mm-hmm. And then pass 112 is a totally different protection with rules. And okay, no longer if the safety blitzes off the weak side at UConn, I might have been protected and now I'm not. So that's different. And then hang could be a totally different concept of routes than it was at UConn. Mm-hmm. So that process of erase and relearn became, you know, a frustrating experience because I was like, why does it have to be like this? Why can't it just be like this? But you realize coaches have their way, and coaches have their way of calling things. And again, it's not his job to get me to understand it or to understand it the way I want him to. It's my job to understand it the way he wants me to. And once we get to that point, that's when creativity comes. But it's my job to initially learn that stuff. You know, it was really cool because I went from Detroit, and in Detroit I had my first 4 years, I had 4 different systems and 4 different coordinators. Wow. So as terrible of an experience as that was, it also was a blessing in disguise for me because the ability to quickly forget and then quickly learn and quickly find different ways to study was a big deal. And I thought I studied well. And then I went to Houston under Gary Kubiak, and I was like, wait, you know what? Because Kubiak would force Kubiak would force us as quarterbacks to, you know, I'm trying to think of a visual. So a play call sheet is like that big. Now he would go front to back with all his play calls, a couple hundred. We would have to memorize those every week. And Saturday night before a game, he would sit down with all of us, not just the starter, and go, okay, give us your reads on every play. And we would have to go through all our plays and go, okay, you know, drag and line, which was slant, drag, double slants. We'd have to start there and go, okay, this is my read first. You know, I'm going to read in and out to down to the back. And we would go through all our plays. And then he called them stumpers. And then our quarterback coach, Greg Knapp, did this too. He'd be like, okay, give me all the plays that have an animal in them.
Jesus.
And so it forced you to study. And so I remember I'd be in bed with my wife till 12, 1 in the morning. And she'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'd be like, "I'm studying." And so it was annoying to go through, but you went into a game on Sunday going, "I know exactly what I'm going to do with the football." And that kind of really started my studying growth and my ability to figure out different ways to learn. Analogies or grouping things together, compartmentalizing became a big part of my studying.
We recently had on John Potter, who had kicked in the NFL for a few seasons, and he said that after college, when you get to the pros, it's less about the physical differences between the individual athletes. It's all about the mental aspect of the game.
Sure.
So from everything you're saying, you would agree with that sentiment?
Oh, it's not even close. I mean,
yeah,
of course you need to have physical talent. I mean, you're the greatest of the greatest of the greatest, no doubt. But I tell people like this, and it's one of the things that I tried to stress this year with the draft and whatnot, because I'll talk about the quarterback position. Everyone nowadays goes, and it's always been the case because we're visual people. People look at a guy and go, "Man, look how big he is and how far he can throw the ball, how strong his arm is." And I'm like, well, give me the top 10 guys in the NFL. Let's go Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, Roethlisberger, Stafford, Cousins, Phillip Rivers. One of those guys are going to go, "Man, his arm is ridiculously strong." Maybe two. Everyone else, their arms they're good arms, but they're not their calling card. It's not the greatest attribute they have. And I always we fall in love like, "Oh, this guy can throw a ball a mile," and I go, "That's awesome. The football field is 100 yards, and I don't care about miles." So, it's the physical part plays, and certainly you need to have that as your starting point. But it's so much more, and it's not even intelligence; it's functional intelligence. Can you take this stuff that you learn in a meeting room and then put it on a piece of paper, and then take it from a paper and put it on a board, and then take it from a board and being able to do it while bodies are moving in a walkthrough, and then taking it from a walkthrough and doing it in practice, and then taking it from the ability to do it in practice and doing it in a game, and then can you do it in a game when you've been hit in the mouth 15 times at the quarterback position? That's the ability to play. And so, the mental thing, and then the ability to do it in a brainwashed sense over and over and over and over and over. And, it's that commitment to repetitiveness that is the absolute challenge.
So, Dan, do you think that's why there's a lot of turnover in the NFL as far as like how many guys the NFL team will bring in and then those guys are just gone in a matter of rookie camps or even before making the final cuts? Is it because they get lost in that process you just mentioned, or is it usually from day one early when they get handed a playbook, it's like, I can't wrap my brain around this? Maybe because they haven't grown in college at a rate because they were, their play calls were very simplistic, and now they get to the NFL and it's, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's certainly a part of it is guys come in and are in a way incapable of making that transition. I think a lot of guys think it's going to be easier than it is. A lot of players aren't all that different than people, everyday people and fans. And fans think, "Oh, this guy's going to be great because he's 6'4", 240 pounds." And a player thinks that too. And then they get there and then it's the reality of, oh, it's much more about me being able to be tall, big, and fast. And so, I think the turnover of guys don't have the skill to transition mentally, and then aren't willing to maybe break down, take a step back, and reboot in a way mentally. I think that's a big part of it too, is guys just think, "I'll still overcome." Well, your athleticism allowed you to overcome in your past when you were in high school and college because you're the best guy on the field. Now you're on the field with the best people out of 7 billion in the world. And so no longer is your physical, going to be a dominant trait.
Sure. Absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
So, Dan, I want to ask you, one season that you had spent in Indianapolis, it's the year that Peyton Manning was there but was hurt. Peyton Manning's going to go down, of course, as one of the best to ever do it. So I just wanted to ask, Was there anything, again, he wasn't playing, but just from being in the same facility as him, was there anything that you saw from him, that how he approached the game, or maybe how he interacted with you, that you could draw a little bit of insight that help you with your career?
Absolutely. It was one of those things where I had this quote that was given to me as a college kid, and it made sense to me, and it certainly changed my life, but I got to see it practically from Peyton. So it was my freshman year of college. I was a bad student. My coach called me into his office and said, you'll never play for me again, GPA. And as I was leaving, he hit me with, how you do anything is how you do everything. And that certainly stopped me in my tracks and made a lot of sense to me.
I like that. That's
and
good. Yeah.
My 5th year in the NFL or so was when I was in Indy, 6th year in the NFL. And Peyton had his neck thing, and we were out for a walkthrough. And walkthroughs were walkthroughs, like, hey, get in, trippy right, and we're going to run, 55 left, can it with something. And I'd get to the line of scrimmage in a walkthrough, and I'd be like, very nonchalant. Walkthroughs were very nonchalant. And I remember Peyton being out there, and within 3 plays, not flipping out, but certainly being very firm and not allowing walkthrough to be a walkthrough mentally. And so he was like, no, guys, that's not how we do it here. And I was like, it's a walkthrough, bro. Like, what do you mean? And so he kind of took over, got guys in the huddle. And right when he walked into the huddle, he was in New England for the AFC title game. I mean, he was screaming loud. He starts to sweat. He breaks the huddle, has a little bit of tempo going to the line of scrimmage. He's barking out his cadence literally like he's on the road in New England, and pointing out hots and this and that. And then the ball gets snapped, and he shuts it down, and he goes through walkthrough mode. And he was like, you have to treat every single play like you're in the game. And so you're getting those, literally he started sweating in one play from just the emotional energy he was bringing. And that was like one of those moments I was like, dang, this dude, when it comes to this, it's gassed down all the time with Peyton. And that's what afforded him to be great, and now certainly his brain was light years away from most people, and certainly mine. But I think that little snippet of watching him operate in a walkthrough setting with such a dominant presence before the ball was snapped was really impactful to me.
Yeah, from the way you just described it, I would imagine. But you mentioned New England. Now, you had a chance to play against New England, and I was trying to pull up the stats real quick. 353 yards and 2 touchdowns that season that you played in Indianapolis. Being from Connecticut, does that have any special significance to you for the hometown team? Yeah,
it was nice. It was a lot of fun that day. I had obviously a bunch of people in the crowd and had a chance to play against one of the greats and Brady and whatnot. And we forced them to, in an onside kick situation, we kicked an onside and didn't get it. And I was fully confident we would have gone down and scored again type situation. But yeah, it was a really fun day to go back there and be a part of a pretty exciting game, lots of points on the board and whatnot. So it was one of those moments for me that took me back in time, very nostalgic, growing up in Connecticut and running around. It was probably late November, early December game as well. So the weather was relatively similar to what I had grown up playing with. So it was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. Then I want to transition to afterlife football. You're now hosting the American Flag Football League, which features likes of Michael Vick, Chad Ochocinco playing on flag football. Can you talk to me a little bit about the football analyst life and the life after football? I'm sure you still see the game the same way. You're still reading your check downs with defense blitzing and everything mentally. But how's it been translating to the booth calling games?
It's been a lot of fun. I think that as a backup quarterback, it's a very unique world because my job was never about being on the field. My job was about having impact off the field. And because there's 53 jobs, and I had to find providing value to my team other than on Sundays because I was more than likely not going to play. And so really on my journey as a backup, it was about watching stuff, taking it in, communicating, and taking it in, communicating, and breaking it down and getting this person to understand it who's very bright and this teammate of mine to understand it who's dumb as a brick. So that was kind of part of that journey that afforded me this kind of unique skill. And also, being a backup, you got to get along with everybody on your team. And that's part of it, being in the locker room. So your personality better be, you can hang out with the 21-year-old who wants to, go out on town, and the 30-year-old who's got 3 kids. So your personality needs to be able to do a lot of different things too. So going into the booth has been a lot of fun. There's challenges there that I didn't ever understand, and people never can until you actually do it. So that's a big part of it. And it's just, listen, football is absolute joy of mine. And so it's the opportunity to get people to see football in a new way, in a different way, in the way that I kind of learned it from so many people in front of me, and then communicate it to them, because the more people fall in love with it, the more they're going to like it, the more they're going to understand it and want more of it. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm really excited for the future in the next couple of years and doing it and whatnot. And it'll be a blast to be a part of, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that flag league is fun to watch too, seeing the guys run around out there.
They're doing a good job with it. There's a place for it. I do believe that there's a place for it. I mean, because there's the NFL is the NFL, and it's the king of the castle. And just because you can't be a part of the mountaintop doesn't mean you can't be part of the journey. So
sure.
I think that this league is going to afford some people the opportunity, because if you look at the guys that are coming from like the non-pros, not the guys that played in the NFL, but just the guys that play flag football, really their story is they're not big enough, which they weren't big enough to play in the NFL, but they're skilled and they've got talent, or they might just be they're a little too slow to play in the NFL.
Yep.
And so again, they're not ancient slow. They're not running 6 flat 40 type guys, but they're not fast enough to play in the NFL. So is there a place for them? And I think this is going to afford a lot of guys the opportunity to go do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like I said, it's fun. It's fun watching those guys run around in a non-contact way, and still be able to get the enjoyment of football, running, catching, and doing all the fun things that happen in football.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what Steve's going to walk you through now, and I'll let Steve explain it. We do this every show. It's called the Gauntlet.
Yeah.
Steve, I'll let you explain it. Go ahead.
So Dan, before we get you out of here, we have our segment called the Gauntlet. We're just going to go through a couple questions with you, and they're just going to be A or B type of answers. So just pick which one, all right?
Yeah.
What's more important, the number 1 offense or the number 1 defense?
Number 1 defense.
Which would you rather, defensive battle or a shootout?
Shootout.
3rd and medium, are we going pass or run?
Depends on what the flow of the game is, but I'll say pass.
Spread offense or power offense?
Spread.
Stud receiver or stud running back?
Stud receiver.
All right. Your most physically gifted teammate from your entire career?
Calvin Johnson.
All right. Well, I was going to ask best receiver, but Calvin might take the cake there as well.
Best receiver, I'd go Andre Johnson.
No, all right. Best teammate to never become a household name? Someone that just didn't get the love.
Give me a second on that one. Best teammate to never become a household name. I'll say a guy, Kevin Walter, played receiver down in Houston with me. Played about 11 years in the NFL. Really good receiver, but in that offense, when Arian Foster was rolling, receivers kind of doing some dirty work, blocking on the edges, was a big part of the offense, and Kevin was that guy. So his impact wasn't just felt by catches, it was felt by everything that he did, and he was an absolute key part of the success that team and that offense had.
Very cool. Commentating or being on a panel in a studio for a show?
I'm a year away from being able to answer that. I'm going to say being on a panel in a studio on a show right now.
Got it. And last one, what's more important, players or scheme?
Players.
That's been the theme.
It's been the theme, yeah. We always like to close off the show with that question. Once again, Dan Orlovsky, we appreciate you coming on, and this has been an awesome story and just an awesome background, and I hope people can go through your journey and what you've been through, the 12 seasons you've been through in the NFL. And we wish you the best in the commentating world. And once again, thanks for coming on. Dan Orlovsky, you can catch him NFL Network, right?
Right now, I'll be on NFL Network to call that last game, and then I'll be on ESPN during the fall.
Perfect. Look
Very
forward
cool.
to seeing you. Thanks again, Dan. And
appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, until next time.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.